She's a motivator, a self-made multimillionaire, spiritual guide to students in over 90 countries, nutritionist and a wellness educator, and founder of 3 international schools.
A fine artist whose works can be found in private collections around the world, a fierce defender of children and animals, and a former Wall Street attorney who left the concrete jungle for the tropics over 20 years ago, where her life's mission has been to teach people all over the world how to master their energy, reclaim their personal authority and sovereignty, and develop a real relationship with the true Jesus.
But to us, she's our mom, who loved us unconditionally from birth to now, who has been there for us 24/7 our entire lives without fail, always putting us first.
The mom who protected, nurtured, empowered, and initiated us, making us her number one priority for the past 22 years.
The mom who creates a home filled with love, empowerment, support, and guidance.
Laughter, fun, and really good food. And now, welcome to She Can Have It All with your host, Liana.
Aloha, everyone. Welcome back to She Can Have It All. This is your host, Liana. Welcome to episode 3. So today we're going to be talking about the issue of women's appearance, which is obviously constantly a hot topic. It's been a hot topic since the beginning of time, since women have been blamed for bringing downfall into the Garden of Eden. We know Eve and Pandora opening the box and, letting out all of the evils. And so the premise that we have to start with when we examine this issue is the premise that the Luciferian agenda is what controls the planet. Jesus tells us that. We know that it's a truth that darkness rules the earth. If darkness didn't rule the earth, there would be no war, there would be no rape, there would be no human trafficking, there would be no child abuse, there would be no animal abuse. So we know without a shred of doubt that evil rules this planet. And anyone who is rational and who's actually looked at society, looked at the world, can clearly see that it is dark and evil energy that dictates the predominant zeitgeist of planet Earth. There has always been war. There has always been aggression and murder and destruction of people's rights and freedoms. And so we have to start with that. The reason we have to start with that, which may seem like a very distant topic to the question of should women dress like pilgrims or should they dress like Dolly Parton or somewhere in the middle? The reason this is such an important premise to clear up right from the beginning is because of the fact that when you are taking a look at a philosophical issue, which essentially it really is a philosophical issue, this issue of women and their appearance. It's philosophical, it's religious, there's so many layers to this, but any philosophical issue that you want to have an intelligent, well-informed, educated discussion on, you have to understand the bigger picture that issue fits into. So everything we talk about has to be looked at through the eyes of understanding what is ruling this earth. And everything I teach comes through the understanding that we have to rise above the duality, because everything that's presented to you by darkness is coming at you through duality thinking. It's men versus women. It's conservative Republican versus liberal Democrat. It's rich versus poor. It's black versus white. It's one culture versus another culture. It's one religion versus another religion. And if you're stuck in that, which a lot of people are, majority of humanity stuck in that, your inner children will seek to find what they believe they can be validated by. So when you saw what was happening in the Middle East, you saw people get very riled up. People are still very riled up. People are trapped in the duality and they are not able to see beyond what's really happening and how all of the emotional angst and sadness and energy and fighting and arguing and a complete and utter inability to see that anything that is part of the duality is part of darkness. Very few people are able to look at each issue in their individual life and decide on a point-by-point basis what is true. And that's why it's very difficult for people to comprehend someone like myself who doesn't fit into any box, never have and I never will, because I see beyond the duality. And I see how it tears people away from their own soul. It tears people away from their sovereignty. And of course, everything I teach is about sovereignty. And with this issue, one of the biggest issues I think facing humanity today, and I say humanity, not just women, because everybody suffers when women suffer, because women are the creators. Women hold the creative force of the universe. We birth life into being. And every soul currently incarnated on this planet has come here through the body of a female. So when women are harmed, everyone is harmed. Men, children, the planet. When women are oppressed, the children suffer, the men suffer, humanity suffers. And so the issues that affect women are not women's issues, they're humanity issues. And I think that very basic premise is something that is lost on most people, because again, most people are stuck in duality. And I notice this every time I share a post on something that has to do with women. I get some men that are supportive of that, but then I get some men that say, oh, women have responsibility too. It's not just all men. Meanwhile, nowhere in the post did I even hint that it would be all men. And anyone who's a student of mine and who has been a student for a while knows that I teach that every single human being is solely responsible for their own healing, their own behavior, their own actions. Doesn't matter if you're male or female, doesn't matter if you're straight or gay, doesn't matter if you're black or white, doesn't matter what religious cult background you have. It doesn't matter. You're a human being with a soul. And the journey of a soul isn't about what boxes you fit into. And that's one of the reasons why I am constantly repeating the reality that all religions are cults. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people get triggered by that. And they try to make shame-inducing statements. Luckily, that doesn't work on me because I can't be shamed because it's just truth. But, they really have a problem with hearing that Christians are all worshiping Satan, not God, not Jesus. And Jesus tells us that in John 8:44. He identifies who the devil is, and he gives several descriptors. And he is referring to Yahweh, which is the God of the Old Testament. He continues in his conversation with the Pharisees in John 8, his discussion on Satan. And he says, "Why do you not understand what I am saying? Is it because you cannot accept my message? You are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies." So here is Jesus literally telling us that the God of the Old Testament is literally Satan, but the majority of Christians, which I call fake Christianity, believe that Yahweh is the supreme God. But Jesus literally tells us that it is Satan. And I think even without going into the entirety of this topic, which can be its own podcast and will be, because I think it's a very important topic, common sense that an Old Testament God who sexually mutilates boys, who believes in murder, who believes in harming animals and children, killing innocent people. That was a directive in the Old Testament. No one, I am 100% convinced, if you were to go into your own heart, quiet, without noise, without religious doctrine, without anybody's opinion, go into your own heart, the inner chamber of your own heart, and ask yourself, ask your higher self, would a loving God issue such evil statements and directives and commands? And I think you'll know what the answer is. Let's just take that a little further, just to help have context for this discussion that we're about to have on women and their appearance. If you take a look at the beginning, Genesis in the Old Testament, Yahweh says, "Of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Genesis 2:17. Well, they didn't die on the day they ate the fruit. Yahweh lied. The snake, the issue of the snake. "You certainly won't die," in Genesis 3:4. They did not die from eating the fruit. The snake was actually speaking the truth. Yahweh himself confirmed that the snake told the truth. He said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil," Genesis 3:22. The snake spoke the truth. God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened. You'll be like God, knowing good and evil, Genesis 3:5. So in summary, it was Yahweh that lied to Adam and Eve. The snake told them the truth. The snake did not kill them. The fruit did not kill them. So what did kill them? Clearly, if it wasn't Eve, if it wasn't this woman who was so awful and to blame for causing the downfall of Adam, what caused their death? We know it wasn't the fruit. We know it wasn't the truth. The cause of their death was being denied access to the fruit of the tree of life. Yahweh denying Adam and Eve access to the fruit of the tree of life was the first cause of any and all human death. Genesis 3:22-24. "He must not reach out and take the fruit from the tree of life and eat. Then he would live forever." So the Lord God sent the man out of the Garden of Eden. God placed angels and a flaming sword that turned in all directions to guard the way to the tree of life. Being denied access to the fruit of the tree of life to this very day, all death is a direct result of Yahweh's actions. Satan. Of course, Satan wants to keep you from the truth. That's why we have a duality world. That's why we have people fighting about these issues. That's why we have religion. It doesn't matter which one. Satan doesn't care. If you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, any of the other 500 religions, Satan doesn't care. They're all false. They're all premised on satanic lies. So according to the historical documentation, how long did Adam live? Well, Adam lived 930 years. He wouldn't have died at all had he still had access to the fruit of the tree of life. The death of Eve, well, it's not recorded. We don't have any information on that. The truth is there, but most people have never studied the Bible. Let me start with that. They've never studied the Old Testament or the New Testament. I've studied both. Most of you know that. Studied it extensively, studied biblical history, studied biblical archaeology. Not only that, but have had my own relationship with Jesus for my whole life. And I firmly believe that anybody, regardless of what religion, background, culture, race you come from, you can have a clear relationship with Jesus as well. He is the avatar for this planet. He is not a religionist. He did not start a religion. He is here to guide souls out of the trap, out of the satanic trap that, as you can see, most people are stuck in. They're stuck believing. It's like their minds are in a vice grip and they can't get out. But Jesus unambiguously identifies Yahweh as the devil in John 8. And people say, well, God can't also be the devil. That is correct, because Yahweh is not who the world's major religions claim him to be. The real God, Jesus' Father, is not Yahweh. Nowhere in biblical text does it identify the snake as the devil. It's an extraneous idea. It's outside of the Bible. It came from outside of the Bible. It came from Rome, not the Bible. Most of Christianity, the ideas of how Christianity is practiced today, came from ideas out of Rome, not the Bible. I share that with you to open up this conversation on women, because I shared a post today, as a matter of fact, on the issue of women and how they dress. And it was very eye-opening for a lot of people. The vast majority of people are very grateful for the post. And there were, a handful of people who were very, very triggered by the post. Very, very triggered. And it's very sad to me when people are triggered on an issue like this, because it's an indication of how stuck they are and where they're stuck. And the general point of my post was that what you dress like, what you wear, how you style your hair or your nails, or do makeup or don't do makeup, none of that has anything to do with your goodness as a person. If you decide to dye your hair and get false eyelashes and get your nails done, and maybe you love makeup and you want to wear a ton of makeup, and maybe you get facials every week, and maybe you buy really nice clothes and heels and you want to dress up and you love that. That says nothing about your virtue, your morality, your integrity, your character, nor your relationship with Jesus. Likewise, if you're a person who doesn't like any of those things and you just hate the idea of dyeing your hair and you're starting to go gray and you love it, you're like, this looks beautiful. I love seeing this in the mirror. And you see your face aging and you love the wrinkles and you're like, I love this. I'm embracing this. I really feel like this adds character to my face. And you hate the idea of sitting in a nail salon for 2 hours, getting your nails done and getting a pedicure. It says nothing about you externally. It says nothing about your relationship to Jesus. It doesn't make you a better or less than person. And that was the whole point of the post, was that women are free to choose whatever they want to choose. And unfortunately, there is a very disturbing and disgusting, to be quite honest, trend that is pushing really hard at this idea that to not do anything to your physical appearance is somehow better. And connecting that with behavior and virtue. And it's disturbing and disgusting because, once again, it's an attack on the divine feminine. Now, let's get one thing straight. We all know that a huge percentage of women, at least at some point in their life, have been very insecure about their appearance through no fault of their own. This comes from parents who make comments about appearance, fathers who make comments about other women's appearance. I have very few students that I've ever spoken to who did not have a father that made comments about appearance, or that ogled other women, or that watched porn, or had porn magazines back in the day. I have very few students who have said their mothers absolutely loved themselves in all ways, especially physically. And coming from that, what do we expect women to do? Women do all kinds of things. A woman might react by doing everything under the sun to try to look her physical best and still not be happy when she looks in the mirror. There are studies of women who get multiple plastic surgeries and they're still not happy. Changing the way they look didn't change their inner happiness. And they're doing everything: nails, hair, eyelashes, skin, surgical procedures, still not happy. Likewise, there are women who have completely given up on themselves, who do nothing, who take no care in their appearance whatsoever. And they are miserable inside, but they've just given up. And then there are the women who maybe used to do those things: hair, nails, makeup, you name it. Maybe they even got Botox, fillers, whatever they kind of went down that road into. And then one day they decided, you know what, this is too much. I don't want to do this. I don't really like this. I don't feel healthy. And they scale it back a little. And there's women who never thought that they were worthy of spending $200 and getting their nails done or their hair or whatever. And then they're like, you know what, I am worthy. I'm going to do those things. The point is, none of those choices have anything to do with how good you are of a person. They're more a reflection of where you're at in your life. And you can look at two women, both of whom get their hair done, both who have their eyelashes done, both of whom have their eyebrows done, both of whom have manicures and pedicures every 2 weeks, both of whom get facials, both of whom spend a huge amount of money on skincare, both of whom are always looking for ways to, either maintain or even improve on the beauty that God gave them. And one of those women might be radically secure, happy, loves what she sees in the mirror. The other could be a complete internal mess inside. And all the things she's doing, she's only doing because she thinks she has to get approval from men. And I think there are a lot of assumptions around that. And I know personally from my own experience, there are, given the way that people respond to some of the things that I share. And, I have always been a person who has loved my appearance, no matter what it's been, even at my worst. I never ever looked in the mirror and said, I hated what I see. I was always so grateful for what God gave me, my own beauty. I've never wanted to be someone else. When I was a teenager, I never said, oh, I wish I looked like this woman or that woman. I would see gorgeous women back in the day. I thought Christy Brinkley was just so incredibly beautiful. And I didn't want to look like her, right? So I never looked in the mirror, not as a teenager, not as a young woman, not at 52. I never looked in the mirror and said, oh God, I hate what I see. But I think that's really rare. But my daughter's the same way, and she's 22. Never once have I ever heard her say anything derogatory about her appearance. And she dresses how she wants. Her style is completely different than mine. Our aesthetic is completely different. And I love that. And she is not a person who gets her nails done and pedicures or eyebrows or eyelashes. But she's constantly dyeing her hair, pink, purple, whatever color under the sun. And, she gets tattoos that she likes. And she dresses in a very cute, unique, funky style, completely different than how I dress. The point is, she loves herself and she loves what she sees in the mirror. The reason for that is because she's never heard me say anything negative about myself, because I just don't think those things. And I never heard my mom say those things either. My mom always felt that she was beautiful, and she always was very happy to be who she was. She embodied her femininity, her womanhood. And that's a massive blessing. And I didn't have a dad who made comments about other women. I've never heard my father one time in my entire life make a comment about another woman's physical appearance. Never. Not that someone was beautiful or that they were ugly or he wasn't ogling other women. There was no porn in our home. There was no sense that he was even having opinions about what other people look like, all other than I constantly heard him say how when he met my mom, it was love at first sight, and he thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. That's all I ever heard about beauty. It just wasn't something that was regularly discussed. But I think I know that that's the minority, because I really haven't met anyone who has that exact set of circumstances. And so when I met my husband and I would get my nails done and do all these other things, and he would say to me in the beginning, he would say, "You're so beautiful. You don't need to do that." And I was like, I think you have me mistaken for somebody else. Because did I ever say, I think I need this? And he's like, well, no. And I said, well, yeah, I don't need this. I want this. I want these things. It's the same reason that I am home working a lot of the time by myself, and my family's off doing other things. I don't even see a single soul for the whole day. And I have the full eye makeup, and then I take it off before I go do a workout, and nobody even saw that I had it. So I don't take pictures of it. It's something I do. I'm an artist. I love the beauty of eye makeup. I love the beauty and the artistic nature of my nail designs, my pedicures. And it's a very important manifestation of who I am. And that's an aesthetic, and it's coming from a place of self-love. And never have I thought that I needed those things. I had back surgery back in 2009. Many of you know this story. And probably one of the worst periods of my life in terms of my physical self. I was not able to work out. So I was just not in the best shape of my life. And definitely was not getting any hair done, no hair extensions, nothing. I stopped getting manicures and pedicures. I was just in excruciating pain. I had an L5 disc that blew out. It was pressing on my sciatic nerve. My life revolved around the extreme pain for several months. And by the time it came around to having the surgery, I was a mess. And the surgeon said to me, I don't even know how you're walking. Like, your pain has to be on a scale of 1 to 10, it has to be like at a 15. I'm like, it is. And my husband said to him, yeah, she just tolerates the pain and keeps pushing through. And it was excruciating, to say the least. And the last thing I could focus on at that point was doing anything for myself. And it was difficult even to sit on the toilet to go to the bathroom. My husband had to help me with everything. And when you're in a situation like that, you have no choice but to look at your emotional state, your mental state, your physical state, and say, okay, what is going on here? What is the message here? And I got the message very loud and clear as to what that was about, because all injuries and illnesses are coming from some issue in your life. That could be a podcast in and of itself. But I share that to say that I 100% for sure feel like that was probably the worst physically, like just objectively, if somebody looked at me from the outside, that I've ever looked. I was getting no sleep. I was sleeping in 15-minute increments. I was puffy. I was just not feeling good at all and had no desire or energy. Well, all my energy went to just basically making it day by day until I finally found the right person who was able to tell me what was wrong. And so during that period of time, I was just wearing the most comfortable clothes possible because it was excruciating to even get dressed. And, we had traveled when it got really bad. I had seen a doctor here on Kauai who told me it was a piriformis injury, muscle wrapped around my sciatic. And he said, it's from all this cycling you're doing. You just overtrained and it's muscle. And that's why you're in this pain. And he had me convinced that that's what it was. And also I wanted to believe that, right? I didn't want to believe it was anything more serious. So it went on for months and got progressively worse. And I was on a business trip in Puerto Rico when I hit rock bottom with the pain to where I could not handle it. And we had a doctor come to the hotel room and I'm laying flat on my back. I couldn't sit. I could stand or lay flat, couldn't sit. And so far from home. And he came in the room and he's like, you can't see anything. When somebody has like a back injury, unless you're getting an MRI, they can't tell what's wrong with you. And he was like, what do you want? I'm like, I don't know. Can you help me? I don't take pain meds. I don't know what to do. So he gives me like a couple of patches. I had no idea what they were back in the day, but they were fentanyl. And I start looking it up. I start researching it on my phone. I'm like, I'm not taking this. Right away, because when I'm trying to look something up, I'm instantly looking for the worst case scenario. Like what side effects, what horrible side effects does this thing have? It's like the one time I considered getting LASIK surgery. I'm like, LASIK surgery failures, like LASIK surgery disasters, because I want to know the word. I want to kind of get a bigger picture here. So I looked up the fentanyl patch. I'm like, forget it. I'm not taking this. So I took nothing. And then we had to fly back to Hawaii, which didn't happen for another 2 months. We ended up being on the road because I went from Puerto Rico to Miami. And then most of that flight, I stood up. I had to beg the flight attendants to let me stand up, which they did. And, I had to sit for takeoff and landing. But other than that, they let me stand the whole time. I explained my situation. And then we stayed in a hotel in Miami for a few days. And then we went from Miami to Dallas. And we were in Dallas for a few days. And things were just getting progressively worse. And I'm trying to make my way back to Hawaii, right? And then we get from Dallas to Las Vegas, doing all these like shorter flights, making our way back. And eventually, Las Vegas, that was it. I was done. Couldn't move. And we ended up being in Vegas for a couple of months. which is ultimately where I ended up having the surgery. I finally ended up going to the hospital because I'm like, I just can't see how this is a muscle. But over time, when you're not getting sleep, I'm getting like literally sleeping in 15-minute increments. I'm barely eating, and what I'm eating is not healthy. I'm just eating whatever food was available, restaurant food. My husband would go get me food. And I am not making the best decisions because I'm on no sleep and I'm in excruciating pain, constant pain. And so my husband took me to the hospital, and I was in the emergency room and got the MRI, and there's a lot of waiting around, and I'm still in terrible pain. And my kids were at the hotel. They were with us this whole time. My kids and my ex-husband were just like on this multi-month journey across America from Puerto Rico. But I'm in the hospital, and they do the MRI, and then they tell me, we're going to be admitting you. I'm like, wait, admitting me? Why am I getting admitted? They're like, well, because you have a severe problem. You have an L5 disc that is like blown out, and we don't even know how you're walking. So I said, okay. So they admit me. I go up to a room. It's late at night at this point. It's like getting past like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And the nurse had hooked me up to IV, and she's giving me pain meds. And I have an interesting relationship with pain meds. My body metabolizes them out instantly. I don't like taking them, and they don't even really work. So she'd given me morphine. It didn't do anything. And so then she tries another medication called Dilaudid, gives me that. She's like, this one's really strong. And so she was giving me that every 3 hours. I was in there for 2 3-hour periods, I think, before I finally saw the doctor. And the Dilaudid was taking a little bit of the edge off. My pain would go from a 15 down to like a 9. So I guess that was maybe more than a little, but it was still painful, just a little bit more bearable. And the surgeon comes in scrubs, and he says, we are operating on you tonight, so make sure you don't eat anything. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm definitely not having surgery. There's no way. Like, are you crazy? And he was this awesome neurosurgeon, originally from New York. And he was in his scrubs, and he told me that he was in the middle of like craniotomy. And he said to me, you need me more than I need you. And he was really arrogant, but straight. I mean, he was truthful. Like, I appreciated that. I appreciated that New York bluntness and that no bullshit attitude. And so I was going down the rundown of why I didn't think this was a good idea. And he's like, what are you, a lawyer? I was like, yeah. A former New York lawyer. So we ended up hitting it off, and we ended up having really good rapport. And so I did end up having the surgery that night. And I said to him, are you even okay to operate? Because I didn't go in for surgery till like 12:30. He's like, look, he goes, you got blessed by the gods today. You must have like angels all around you because you got me. I'm like, what? But it's true. I Googled him. He's one of the top 3 neurosurgeons in the world. And I was so grateful to have a neurosurgeon, not an orthopedic surgeon, cutting into my spine. And I loved that about him because he was real. He was so truthful about who he was. And everything I found out was that he really is as good as he said he was. And he said to me, look, I want to help you, and I'm here. I don't have to do this. He goes, I can pass this off till the next guy comes in when I'm done with my rounds here. And he said, if you call my office, which you're welcome to do in the morning, he said, you'll not be able to get an appointment with me for over a year. He goes, that's how far out I'm booked. And people come from all over the world to have surgery with me, all of which turned out to be true. And so I'm like, okay, this is God. This is Jesus. I'm doing this. And I'm like, I'm going to go for it. And I'd never had surgery before. I was super scared. And the orderlies came to take me into the elevator. It's like after midnight. I'm like, this guy's tired, and I was really scared. And I just prayed. I was like, okay, Jesus, if this is meant to be, just help me feel calm. Instantly felt this warmth over my whole body. And I felt peace. I felt calm. And then we went into the OR, and he was like, what kind of music do you like? I'm like, Led Zeppelin. And he's like, great. And he put Stairway to Heaven. I'm like, really? He's like, look, he goes, if you bleed out on the table and die, you're definitely going to heaven. You're one of the good ones. He's like, so yeah, I thought this was appropriate. So like even his humor was something I could really vibe with. And I loved him. And Anyway, it turned out perfect and amazing. And I felt instantly better the minute I came out of recovery and, started booking all kinds of fun things to do in Vegas. We went to see magic shows and Cirque du Soleil and all these great things. But, that story is connected to this topic of women choosing what they want for one very important reason, which is why I shared it. Sometimes I take these circuitous routes to get a point across, but I feel like it helps. That goes to the point of illustrating what that period of life was like for me. So from my own personal experience of always having been a person that did not look in the mirror and say negative things to myself or even think them. That was the worst. That was the worst I ever looked, the worst I ever felt. That I just felt so out of touch with who I was. And there were a lot of reasons why. Again, that could be another podcast. But, I looked in the mirror back then and I was like, wow, I don't even look like myself. I don't recognize myself. I didn't say, you look like shit, right? I said, I don't recognize myself. Who is that looking back at me? Because that woman looking back at me is not who I am, right? It's not the core of who I am. The core of who I am is a person who, since I was a little girl, loved different clothes and very colorful things and nail polish. And I always loved those things. And when I was an attorney on Wall Street, and literally all the women that I worked with as attorneys, not secretaries and legal assistants, they were much more free in their choice of hair and nails and dress. The women attorneys I worked with back then, we're talking in the 90s, early 2000s, they were not women who were getting their hair done, nails done. And if they did, their nails were like super short, neutral, buff, color, French manicure, like flat shoes, a lot of pantsuits. And that's awesome. Like my favorite woman in the world, female partner that I worked for, who I loved, I admired. She was an amazing attorney, brilliant woman. I just admired everything about her. Could not have been more different. Her hair was super short, zero eye makeup. She had the buff colored nails. She did get manicures, so they were neat and clean, but nothing flamboyant or fancy or colorful or artistic. Always flat shoes, always pantsuits, always, similar look, as were most of the women I worked with as attorneys. And I was long blonde hair, skirt suits, 3-4-inch heels, always nails, always earrings, always eyelashes. I never put makeup on my face, like foundation, blush, things like that. I have great skin. I have skin that I don't feel needs that. And I don't like how it feels on my skin. But as I've said many times, if I was a person who had, like, let's say uneven pigmentation or acne scarring or anything like that, I guarantee you I would be wearing it because I like the look of like a flawless face, right? So again, it's a choice. But, because that was who I always was, when I was in this period of time where I had the back surgery and was unable to do anything, definitely not going to sit in a nails. I mean, my nails take 1.5 to 2 hours. I mean, they paint designs on every nail. So, I couldn't even sit anywhere on a chair, a bench. Sitting was the worst. So there was absolutely no way I was going to be getting a manicure or a pedicure or hair, anything like that, anything that required sitting. And I had no drive to do that. And yet when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see anything bad. I didn't see anything that I hated. I didn't go, oh God, you just look so terrible. I just felt sad. I'm like, wow, I just don't even look like who I feel like inside. This isn't me. Because even the clothes I was wearing, I was just wearing the most comfortable things, like sweatpants and things like that. So I say that because my experience is that, unfortunately, for the majority of women, that's not their reality. I hear all the time, I hear women, this is just something that's a pet peeve of mine, when anyone, male or female, makes a statement like, oh, women are always, feeling insecure. They always feel like they have to live up to something. There's so much pressure on women. For me, that's bullshit, because I don't feel like that way. And no one's going to ever tell me that I do, because I don't, and I never have. And neither does my daughter. And she's 22. She's grown up in this internet generation where there's so much, quote, pressure on women, but there's not pressure on women who are healed. There's not pressure on women who have healed their mother and father wound, or who don't have it, like my daughter, like myself, because that's not pressure. When I see all of the noise on social media, look like this, look like that, including me, go natural because you're somehow less virtuous if you're not, quote, natural. That's not pressure to me. That's just nonsense and noise. It's like the Charlie Brown noise. Like, what? Huh? No, it doesn't affect me. It's not pressure. I don't feel any pressure. And my daughter doesn't feel any pressure. She had a lot of friends growing up that had pressure to like starve themselves and watch their calories. And, my daughter would be there eating like huge meals, like whatever she's eating till she's done being hungry. And her friends were like, oh my God, I could never eat that much. And she'd be like, why? And like, oh, because it's just too fattening. She's like, whatever. Even her own friends, like she didn't care. She still doesn't care. She's 22. She's right in that age where people tend to be the most impressionable. And all through her teenage years, she never weighed herself. She was healthy as can be. She was stroker for paddling team, and she was athletic, and she has a black belt in Taekwondo. She surfs. She eats what the hell she wants, And it's like there's no pressure. There was no pressure for her because she grew up with me as a mom and with my husband as her dad. And she didn't hear those things because they don't exist in our house, and they didn't exist in my house. So that's a really important premise to start with, in addition to the premise that we are living in a duality. We are living in a world that is premised on satanic lies. We're living in a world that is premised on religious control of the divine feminine. Why is that? Because the oppression of the divine feminine means no one's escaping. And the goal of the Luciferian agenda is to harvest your emotional energy, what is called loosh, Loosh. Google it if you don't know what it is. It's to harvest your energy, because human beings have a soul. You have a soul. You're connected to God. You have the divine spark of life within you. Beings who are dark entities living in the astral plane, Luciferian agents, satanic people, they don't have a soul anymore. They've lost that. So there is no eternity for them. They have a complete abyss to look forward to, of darkness, of no connection to God, permanent disconnect, having consciousness, knowing that they exist, but having nothing and no one around them, and no love, and awareness of their being without any ability to do anything about it. So as long as they can continue using humanity as a harvesting farm and keeping people in this matrix and keeping people in war and enslavement and hatred of each other and duality and fighting over everything from the Ukraine war to the Middle East conflict to Black Lives Matter to politics to abortion to what women should wear, all of these things are the same. That Satan doesn't care. Like, oh, you want to argue about Ukraine? Go have at it. You want to argue that women should be natural? Go have at it. Because anything that gets the divine feminine to break down is a win for Satan. And this topic of physical appearance is so important. In ancient Sparta, so there's a long history. Before I get to Sparta, there is a long history of telling women what they can and cannot wear as a means of controlling a community's political message. So in ancient Sparta, in Athens, many other Greek city-states from around the 4th century BCE, there was actually an appointed group of magistrates called the gyneconomy. Now, probably butchering that. It's a Greek word, but it means controllers of women. Literally, gyneconomy, controllers of women. Their very existence is proof of the ongoing, active controlling of the actions of women in antiquity. And they were all male. I'm sure you could have guessed that by now. The point of these male magistrates was to make sure that women didn't spend too much money on clothing and to regulate attire at religious festivals and to promote the virtue of chastity among women. And in order to enforce dress codes, they were given the power to confiscate clothing or rip the clothes right off of a woman before, quote, donating these clothing items to the gods, of course. They could impose fines. And dress codes for women were highly scripted, down to the color of what they could wear. The mourning garments at funerals, we still see remnants of that. Whenever you see a woman I know there was some issue about this with Melania Trump, who she attended some funeral and it wasn't an appropriate mourning garment. Like, what? There's no such thing as a fucking appropriate mourning garment. But people think, oh, but it's not respectful. Fuck that. According to who? Some male from antiquity? Some Greek freaking gyneconomy? Whoever it is. A magistrate? No. If you believe that, if that triggers you, you are programmed. You are programmed. That is not real. Controlling the type and color of the clothing worn by women was an absolute integral part of maintaining social hierarchy in the ancient world. And when Roman women had significantly more freedoms than most of the Athenian women, there were laws put in place in Rome to control the opulence of female clothing. There was actually something called the Lex Appia, which was a law passed, by the way, by an all-male assembly in 215 BC during the Second Punic War with Hannibal, that actually limited the amount of gold women could own to half an ounce. And I mean, this stuff got crazier and crazier because they were giving women a, quote, right to wear certain items of clothing as a sign of their social station too. So Roman married women were allowed to wear a garment called a stola, which was like a long tunic. And that basically said, okay, I'm a married woman. But then, there were problems when other women would start wearing that because you couldn't tell their level of dignity, right? And this went on into even later antiquity. There were tons of Roman laws in the Justinian Code, which said that it was illegal to dress like a nun if you were a mime, a prostitute, or an entertainer. And the issues there involved so many different layers, but also it was about dressing, quote, above your station, which was actually illegal in many cases. And then dressing below it was also a problem. So, for example, if a man sexually assaulted a woman dressed in the garments of a slave girl or a prostitute, it was a lesser legal offense than if a man attacked a woman dressed as a distinguished mother of the family. So what do we got, ladies and gentlemen? We got the ancient origins of slut shaming based on clothing. And this is the roots in antiquity of the idea that how a woman dresses and how she appears might invite sexual assault. And whole religions are based on this, that if you cover your whole body, that's somehow more virtuous and, you're not going to attract men because poor men that can't control themselves, you shouldn't be looking like this, right? Whole religions push this on women. So we go further into history, into the Middle Ages, where the control of the female appearance continues, legislation continues. A law in 1420 was keeping prostitutes in Paris from wearing clothes that made them resemble honest and bourgeois French women. The implication being, okay, if you're a prostitute, you need to wear what we think makes you look like one and identifies you as one. Again, putting all of the impetus on women. And, when it comes to religion, it's why I am always teaching that all religion is a clever way to justify abuses against the divine feminine across the world. And I think one topic that comes up a lot with this issue is the very hotly debated topic of women wearing a veil or women wearing a burqa, which is often by many Westerners considered to be fundamentally misogynistic. But a lot of people from within those religious communities say that they are fundamentally misunderstood. And it can be really challenging to step outside of that, because when you hear anyone inside of a religion, it doesn't matter if it's Catholic or Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, anyone still trapped inside of a religion is trapped inside of a duality. In other words, they're looking out, they're inside a container. They're inside of a duality. They've chosen a religion over others, or they were born into it, or they were forced into it. But they're existing inside of that tiny container. So inside of that tiny container, they might say, I'm choosing to wear a veil. I'm choosing this to show my faith, or because I believe what it is saying that women should be, quote, modest and cover up, or to protect us from sexual harassment, right? Again, because men apparently can't control themselves. So it's on the women to take care of that. But if you're trapped inside of a religion, you believe that. You believe that fundamental teaching. And so many women that are inside of that container believe that they're making a choice. Free will and actual choice can't be made until you're completely sovereign, which means not being subjected to any religion. Being a sovereign being, free, completely free to make any choice you want at any time without fearing, without feeling condemned, without feeling you're breaking some religious code or law. So by virtue of that, anyone in any religion, male or female, that believes they're making a sovereign decision when they haven't broken free, they haven't broken out of that programming, that's not actual freedom. That's definitely not sovereignty. And I've read so many different pieces of research and so many different opinion pieces of people talking about something like a veil or a burqa being the ultimate symbol of women's oppression, and people really fighting that and saying, is it or isn't it? But, a lot of the women who wear that don't think it is. And, it's not really a discussion that can be had unless someone has broken out. If someone has broken out and they're no longer following any religion, and they decide, you know what? God doesn't want me to wear a veil because that's made up. I see that. There's historical proof of that all of these texts are written by men. And what I wear has nothing to do with my light, my love, my heart, my goodness, my virtue. And I still think I want to go to the beach in head to toe veiling. If that were the case, that could be seen as a sovereign decision. I've never heard of that. I've only heard of people within a particular religion try to claim that they're making free choices. But it's impossible to make a free choice when you are seeing from the inside out, when you're only seeing through the lens of a religion. And this is the same reason why people continue to circumcise, sexually mutilate baby boys. It's a religious belief. And they will go to great lengths to justify that and say, hey, we're choosing this. We want this. Even men will say that, even though it's been proven to actually damage the brain. Proven science. Nobody can dispute that. It's harmful. It's damaging. It reduces sexual experience for men. It is the first act of sexual abuse for all boys who've been mutilated, circumcised. People will go to extreme lengths to justify it in the name of religion. This is how Satan rules, because Satan is the God that puts all of these things in place, that people will fight to the death, defending the very things that harm them. They will believe that they're choosing this. It's like, we're choosing to be part of this. They're not choosing to be part of it if they are not outside of it. If you're outside of it and you read science and you read research and you understand sovereignty, you're not choosing to mutilate your own genitals. You're definitely not choosing to mutilate the genitals of your child. And I've never seen any female choosing to completely hide her beauty under piles of cloth because she's truly free and truly sovereign, minus the programming. So these issues are challenging because you really can't have a conversation with people who are stuck in the duality. It is why when I shared the post that I shared that was the impetus for this podcast episode, her comment was, you shouldn't be condemning women who want to look natural. That should be celebrated. And all that indicated was how little she actually read the words on the page. I had multiple 8 slides and then a whole caption. And in it, I said, whether you choose to do nothing to your appearance or do a lot to your appearance or something in the middle, doesn't matter. Both can be wonderful, both can be bad. Again, because women could choose to do a bunch of stuff and take aggressive steps to combat aging or to look better. And it's all because that's what they love. That's who they are. Or it could be because they are feeling pressure. They feel like they have to look a certain way to be loved, to be validated. Same with the women who are, quote, going natural. That could be because they never liked doing all that stuff. They were doing it to get acceptance. And now they're like, oh, I'm over it. I can just let my hair be the way it is. I love the gray. I love the wrinkles. Don't want to sit in a salon for 2 hours. Hate all of that. Don't care about artistic nails. Could not care less. And that's why I'm doing this. And other women might be doing it because they don't put any effort into themselves. They don't want to put an effort into themselves. They feel like they're not worth it. Or they have a partner who says it's a waste of money. That was another comment that this woman had put on my page. Oh, it's such a crazy amount of money. No, it's not. To me, it's nothing. It's literally nothing. I love spending money on beauty things. Love it. I love getting my nails done. I love spending the money it costs and giving a huge tip to my nail technician. Her artist, she's an artist. I value her work tremendously. And so people make a lot of assumptions when they haven't set themselves free from whatever paradigm they're coming from. And one of the problems and what's so disturbing and disgusting to me is I see this trend of course, there's trends of massive amounts of plastic surgery and mutilations of the body that are actually harmful, like breast implants. And I'm sure a lot of women who have breast implants love them and they look in the mirror and they're like, I look beautiful. And that's great. But unfortunately, breast implants are very harmful and very toxic. So there is a line that can be crossed when you're really causing significant damage to your body. And it's probably one of the reasons explant surgery is one of the fastest growing surgeries right now. I actually did a post about that on Health Mastery Institute also today. And there is a trend of that. And there is a huge part of media and social media that tells women what they should look like and that they should do those things. And that may be one big reason why a lot of women feel pressured to get breast implants. And a lot of women who have always had very small breasts may have always felt less beautiful. And that would be reasonable to infer because of what society typically, at least Western society, pushes as feminine or beautiful. And you see the crazy way, I see it as a totally insane way that people flip-flop from one beauty standard to the other, which is when they have these, anorexic type, non-feminine looking bodies, very masculine looking, starving themselves to death like Twiggy back in the day, or more the androgynous look of like the Victoria's Secret, which there's a lot of research behind that too, that it was designed to get people to be bombarded with the androgyny aspect of like the strong jaw, no hips, like the very straight bodies. And people started saying, oh, I need to look like that, or that's what beauty is, because people are very easily influenced, brainwashed en masse. We see that. We saw that with COVID. But beauty standards that women are supposedly supposed to follow, and they're supposedly supposed to look that way. And then it's something different. Then it became the Kardashians, and then they're supposed to have gigantic butts and bigger boobs, and people are going all out to do glute exercises and get butt implants and the BBL surgeries. Whereas, years ago, that was horrible. It was like, oh my God, that's not attractive. You have to look like a boy. And it's all distorted, and I think that's the other thing that I'm emphasizing here. It has to be what you feel about yourself and how you view yourself. And I've always, for myself personally, followed my own aesthetic, what feels comfortable. I've never changed like the basics of how I dress, the type of clothes I like to wear. I've always kind of liked the same styles, and I've always loved heels, and I've always loved long hair. I've never followed any of the trends when everything was like super skinny and it wasn't in to have an hourglass body and big boobs. I've always had that. Like, I never once was like, oh God, now I got to starve myself to look like this. I'm like, okay, well, they look like that. I look like me. And, I never thought twice about it. I wasn't trying to look like that. And that's what's tragic. And that does affect a lot of women. And there is something to be said about stepping away from that and saying, what do I want to look like? What do I naturally have? What type of body am I naturally curvy? Am I naturally hourglass? Am I naturally straight? I'm going to work with that instead of trying to force yourself into something that isn't maybe aligned for your body. However, at the same time, if you feel that those are things that you would like to have, that's fine too. But it's a fine line. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, because a lot of women feel pressured. They do feel pressured. And they're doing all these things because they feel pressured. And they resent having to spend the money and the time on doing all these things. And that's unfortunate, but equally unfortunate, and as I keep saying, disturbing and really disgusting, is this trend that is the duality to that, right? The other side of Satan's coin, which is this growing group of women who are convinced that to have armpit hair and not shave their legs and let themselves just go whatever they think natural is, like doing nothing, no more nail appointments, no more skincare, no more hair dye. And this woman I saw today, she literally said, oh, I decided to let my hair go natural and stop wearing makeup. And that led to me changing my clothes, wearing more modest clothing. That led to me decluttering my home and doing more wholesome activities. So she's insidiously linking virtues of wholesomeness and goodness and godliness with her clothing, which could not be more absurd. Because I can assure you, God is not a male. God is not floating in the sky like Santa with a naughty and nice list saying, oh, great, Mary is now wearing pilgrim clothes and not going to the nail salon. She's back on the good list. What a virtuous little Mary. And that's exactly how the messaging is coming across. And she was, applauding herself in a way that was very passive aggressive. She was trying to make it sound like it wasn't a judgment on women who might want to walk out in a bikini with the boobs out and, 3-inch nails. But that's what she was doing. And clearly she had her own shame that she was stuffing deep within. And whenever someone is making a judgment on another person's appearance. In other words, saying, oh, because you dress that way, you're somehow not spiritual. And I've had a lot of my students who have said, Liana, in fact, several of the comments on this post are like, yeah, when I first saw you and you got the giant boobs and blonde hair and long nails, I was like, oh my God, how could she be spiritual? That's their own shame, right? And they've all said, thank God I'm not that person anymore, because they went through a phase where they're like, no more nails, no more makeup. I can't look sexy because that's not spiritual. Of course, this all comes from the Adam and Eve bullshit. Eve was bad. She was the seductress. No, Yahweh was Satan and told them not to get the knowledge from the tree of knowledge. And that's what caused the destruction, which of course set up the premise for this Luciferian agenda that has been going on since the beginning of time. We're still dealing with it today. And, these students of mine who have said, God, we were triggered by that. I've never been triggered. I've never cared. I was never trying to wear the white robes and look the part, the fake part, the inauthentic part of what people think it means to be a spiritual leader, to be a teacher of the true Jesus teachings. I don't care. I don't give a shit. I've never tried to do anything that was coerced from Satan's paradigm, clearly, right? And it is great that a number of women are triggered by that, because it helps awaken them to their own beauty and their own sexuality and their own acknowledgement that they're not a sinner because they're sexy or they're beautiful or they want to look more sexy or beautiful for their own self. That's not the destruction of mankind. And all women, until you fully heal and you break out of the duality, Satan's Luciferian agenda, all women are holders of that burden and shame. The belief that the sexuality is the destruction of mankind. It's ingrained in the ethers. It's in the cellular structure, in the energy body. It has to be cleared and purged. It's bullshit. But women are carrying that. And so how we see that play out in society is you see the virgin and the whore, right? That's what Lucifer wants. Again, the duality. And a lot of women, yes, who are putting their bodies on display constantly all over social media, half naked. The vast majority of that is for validation, because that's not a choice about what they're wearing. It's about putting themselves under the spotlight to constantly get validation. And there's a lot of misogyny in that because they're catering to men. They're not catering to women. They're catering to men. And things like OnlyFans and a lot of the distorted feminist movement, which, by the way, is just as misogynistic as the quote patriarchy. I've always been adamantly opposed to the feminist movement for many reasons. But there's a lot of false empowerment in that as well, saying, oh, I'm owning my sexuality. No, you're depleting it. You're allowing parasitic men to drain you, to attach cords to you with their sexual fantasies of you. That has nothing to do with choosing what you want to wear. I mean, if you want to wear sexy, form-fitting, body-conscious clothing, that's great. That's your choice. But in the constant pushing of that narrative in places like social media, that's clearly insecurity. So again, there's so many layers to this, and making a judgment purely based on how someone appears. You know, some people would look at Kat Von D, for example, who is very connected at this point to Jesus, and say, oh, she's got all these tattoos and she looks goth and she looks evil. And this woman today who basically, there's no other way I could describe it other than she looked like a pilgrim. It was straight up 1620s Mayflower. And have at it. I mean, dress like a pilgrim, dress like you're Amish, dress like whatever you fucking want to dress like is my point. Because nothing that you choose to adorn or not adorn your body with, nothing you choose to physically do for your appearance, whether it's hair dye or hair gray, armpit shaving or armpit braids, eyelashes or no eyelashes, sexy dresses or pilgrim frocks. None of it has anything to do with your character, with your integrity, with who you are, with your connection to Jesus, with your beauty, with your creativity, with your light, with your life force. You are the divine feminine. If you are a woman listening to this, you are the divine feminine. And you and only you gets to decide what that looks like. And the guidance that I have is heal your mother wound, heal your father wound, so that you can be sure that you're not programmed, that you're not mind controlled, that your decisions aren't coming from this belief that if you look like a pilgrim, you're somehow a better woman, that if you're canning fucking pickles in your basement and you're a homesteader with, shoddy nails, that somehow makes you better. It doesn't. You might be an amazing person and dress like that, but you also might be an amazing person and dress like J-Lo. There's no correlation whatsoever. And I can tell you what's not amazing. I could tell you why that pilgrim lady is not amazing, because she was casting judgment on all women who dress a way that she has chosen not to. She was casting judgment on their character and on their virtue by saying that going the route of the gray hair and the pilgrim clothes is somehow better and makes her a more godly person. She used words like wholesome and virtue. So that's not a good person. That's a judgmental person. If one of my students came to me and said, you know what, Liana, I used to wear tight dresses and high heels and have hair extensions and eyelashes and long nails, and I never liked it. I did it because my husband wanted me to look that way. And I really hate it. And now I want to go Little House on the Prairie full tilt. I'd be like, fucking amen. Like, awesome. You should do that. Because I am a supporter of women, of the divine feminine and your power as a woman, and all of the men listening to your power as a divine masculine, to support the women in your lives and hold space for them to be the fullness of who they really are. Because I can tell you what, and my husband would echo the same sentiment, there is nothing on earth that feels as good to a divine masculine as a fully blossomed divine feminine in her full power. There's nothing better for a divine masculine. And likewise, there's nothing better for a divine feminine to have that in a partner. So I applaud my students. And I've had a lot of students who've said, you know what, I used to do all that stuff and then I stopped when I went down a spiritual path and I thought I could never do those things. And now I do it some of the time and I don't some of the time. Another student of mine, these are all comments on that post, said, I used to not be able to go out of the house without a full face of makeup. Like I was worried I looked horrible. And I'm free of that after becoming your student. I don't do all those things anymore because I don't have to. Now, when I want to, I do it because I feel like being creative or playing with my makeup or being colorful, but I don't feel like I have to go out of the house. And that to me is power. Why? Because those women commenting, my students who have been healing their mother wound and father wound, they're free to be whoever the fuck they want to be. And it's so hard for women to be that because women have adopted the misogynistic, dualistic framework just like the men have. So the women who are criticizing other women, who are commenting that they shouldn't look like a pilgrim, because that's not okay either, or that they shouldn't look like, overtly sexy. All of that is misogyny. All of that is oppression of the divine feminine. And sadly, mothers are teaching this to their sons and they're teaching it to their daughters. And women's self-hatred when they look in the mirror is being brought down into their daughters that they're raising. And it keeps perpetuating Satan's dualistic Luciferian agenda. And, you see so much self-hatred. The feminine has so much self-hatred. It's beyond tragic. It's beyond tragic. You see it projected when you see women commenting on the physical appearance of other women in a negative way, telling them they shouldn't dress this way, or they should dress that way, or they should eat a cheeseburger, they're too skinny, or they need to go on a diet, they're too fat, or you're too old to be dressing like that. I saw that recently on an account of one woman who is a fitness person. She has mostly done, I think, fitness type stuff. And her name's Natalie Jill Fit, in case you're wondering who I'm referencing. And I happen to think she's great. I don't adhere at all to her food recommendations. I mean, I have a lot not in common with her, but I love her sort of approach to being who she is. And kind of like when I referenced the sculpted vegan, another woman who doesn't give a fuck, I love women like that, even when I don't have so much in common. Sculpted vegan promotes a lot of alcohol and horseback riding, and I could easily find the differences, but what I find is a very fiery, strong woman who's like, piss off if you don't like what I do. And I just love that, especially for people that are having a lot of influence. Like they both have huge accounts, and Natalie Jill had breast implants and she recently had them taken out, I think like 6 weeks ago. And she describes her journey of what that was like, and surgery after surgery, and why she got them. And then there's a lot of younger women, she's my age, she's 52. And she's like, I was that woman. Everyone was telling me they're bad, they're harmful, they cause cancer, they cause autoimmune. I was like, no, not mine. Mine are great. And she's like, so I'm not going to try to convince anybody, because I was not open to listening to any of that. I was convinced that I needed to have these breast implants. And I think her journey is fascinating. And I think she's very courageous to kind of put it out there like that. And I think she's helping a lot of people who have breast implants and are hopefully waking up to what that might be doing in their bodies. But in any event, she has said she has gobs of hair extensions. She's like, I love them and I will always have them, and I will always wear makeup, and I will always dress the way I want to dress. I'm living my life the way I want to fucking live my life. And, she gets a lot of projections. Women are like, you shouldn't dress like that. You're too old. At your age, you should be blah, 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 whatever. That's insecure women. If it's a young woman saying that, it is a woman who has only one way to see women. And that is, if they're older, they're a mom and they should not be sexy. They should not have sex. They should definitely not be having orgasms. That all is loaded. It's sexual repression as to why a younger woman would think that somebody like Natalie shouldn't be dressing the way she dresses, or have her hair the way she dresses. I happen to think she's beautiful, and I think the way she dresses is perfect for her, and it's what she likes. That's what makes it perfect. But when younger women have a problem with older women being sexy or dressing a certain way, it's fear. It's definitely misogyny. It's adopting this belief that sexuality at some point should be shut off. And they are projecting that, and they don't want older women pose a threat to them, especially older women that they think are attractive, because older women have a lot of experience in life, and there are a lot of younger men that are attracted to older women. And so the younger women kind of feel threatened by that, and they see only their own mother. And there's a lot of projection there. And you can always tell whenever I see a younger woman making a comment like that, I know instantly what kind of mother she has or has had. And it's a mother that was self-hating, and a mother that projected that self-hate onto her daughter. And so then you have women her age who project onto her and say the same thing. You shouldn't be wearing that. You shouldn't be doing this or looking like that. And those are women who take no pride in their appearance, have no desire to look sexy, to dress a way that is body conscious, or anything that is not frumpy or what they consider to be, quote, middle-aged or old woman, whatever. And it's sad. I mean, I chuckle at it only because it's just projection. It's all the same thing. It's the internalized misogyny passed down through the mothers and the fathers. But women don't stand a chance until they heal mother wound and father wound. And so they project all this stuff. And for the women who are the same age who project those things onto, say, Natalie, as an example, they are highly likely to be women who have a lot of self-hatred and who have lost their own connection to their femininity and their own connection to their beauty, whatever that would mean for them. Because here's a fact, here is a truth. If you are healed or in the process of healing and you love yourself and you look in the mirror and you love what you see, and you genuinely see your own beauty, internal and external, and you wake up every day feeling confident about who you are, and you need zero validation from a man, from a woman, from a friend group, from somebody on the internet, you would never in a million years leave a comment on someone's page about their appearance. You would never judge someone by their appearance. You might have conclusions when you hear people's justification for their appearance. For example, someone saying they're choosing to wear, quote, modest and wholesome clothing. In other words, putting an attribute of goodness onto a fucking dress. I don't care if your dress is backless and cut down to your belly button in the front and up to your crotch. That's not wholesome. It's a fucking dress. If you're wearing something that looks like it came off the Mayflower and you suddenly think that that dress is virtuous, no, it's not. It's a fucking piece of clothing. You are attaching meaning to it. It doesn't have any inherent meaning. It has only the meaning that you accept. I don't accept anybody's meaning but my own. And I have my own conversations with God. I have my whole life. I'm 52. I've been having the same conversation since age 2. I do not rely on outside opinion for anything, mainly because my dad taught me when I was a very little girl, don't listen to the opinions of other people unless you want to be like them. If you see somebody that you admire and has something you aspire to, whether it's a quality, a trait, whatever it is, then yes, listen to them. And it might be only in one area. Maybe you like the way they dress. Maybe you like the way they speak. Maybe you like the way they engage with the world. Whatever it is, then yes, maybe they raised amazing kids and you want to be that type of parent. Then yeah, listen to them. But if not, tune it out. Because they're just projecting their insecurity, their religious programming, their cultural programming, their authoritarian parenting, projecting, vomiting, all of their shit. Don't let it into your head. So I never have. I just don't care. And so you know that you have healed your internalized misogyny when you go about your day and you see all kinds of women in all kinds of dress with all kinds of hairstyles and all levels of attention to their physical appearance, ranging from none to extreme. And you don't care. You don't have an opinion. You don't think, even if you don't say it out loud, you don't think, oh, wow, she should dress more modest, or she shouldn't look like a church mouse, or, oh, she should dye that gray, or, oh, why is her hair bleached? Or, oh my God, she has too much makeup, or, oh my God, this woman needs makeup, or, oh, this lady's too old to be wearing that short skirt, or, oh, this lady shouldn't have hair down to her waist because she's too old. When you don't do those things, you know you've healed your misogyny. If you're still doing those things, you're still holding on to self-hatred, insecurity, and misogyny, because you're projecting that onto what other women should or shouldn't do. Again, the conversation of behavior of somebody maybe putting themselves all over social media intentionally to get attention or validation, that's a completely separate discussion. That's not the discussion that this is about. We can have that discussion as a whole separate conversation. But by merely looking at what a person looks like, what they're wearing, how they choose to dress, how they choose to do or not do their hair, their makeup, their nails, etc., in zero ways is a reflection of their character, their closeness to God, their light. And so when you've healed that, you don't have those comments anymore. And you're not triggered by that anymore. You know, a lot of women, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this either now or in the past, a lot of women feel very threatened by a woman who is overt with her sexuality. So if you're wearing body conscious clothes or your boobs are out, there are a lot of women who assume that you're doing it to get attention. And maybe some women are, but some women definitely aren't. It's just a choice to dress the way they want to dress. But a lot of women who don't do that and who aren't comfortable with their sexuality, there's a lot of repressed sexuality that goes along with misogyny. It's one of the main reasons why so many women are challenged with orgasms, especially cervical orgasms. It's a huge problem. And a lot of it is from internalized misogyny, and why many women have to fantasize to even have an orgasm. That's another whole podcast topic. In fact, many of you asked me to do podcasts on the issues of sex, and I will. But because of that repression, when a woman is out in public and sees another woman who she feels looks, quote, sexy or is overtly confident in her sexuality, and that woman isn't, it feels very threatening to that woman. And especially if she's with a man, she's primarily worried that her boyfriend or husband is going to be looking at this other woman. And so she projects this self-hatred onto the other woman as if the woman is doing something wrong. And if the husband or boyfriend does look at the other woman or comment about the other woman or whatnot, that makes the repressed woman feel devastated and insecure and less than. And she takes that anger out, not only on that woman she sees out in public, but in women on the internet, where she can safely, with an anonymous Instagram account, usually a lot of these people, not all of them, they're not always anonymous, but she can safely vent her self-hatred and go on other people's pages and make nasty comments about women who are overtly sexual. Again, not having the conversation as to why a lot of women feel sexual attention is a good thing when it's usually not, because it's a lot of cords and a lot of attachment, especially on the internet, but different conversation. So that's a huge problem for a lot of women. And for a lot of men, if they see a woman who's very confident and overt with her sexual energy, they think it's for them. You know, I've gotten that. I can't even tell you how many times. If I'm out jogging, running, whatever I'm doing, and I have a tank top on, I have huge boobs, I'm not trying to hide them. I'm not going to wear a t-shirt. I hate t-shirts. In fact, when I get a t-shirt, the first thing I do is cut the neck off. I hate the restriction. Even with necklaces, I wear one. I don't like that feeling of like stuff around my neck. And I am trying to be about my business and do my own thing. I am never trying to have conversations with men or with women. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to have interactions when I'm out and about doing things. And yet there are always going to be those guys who think your boobs are out so they can look at them or ogle or make comments. And it is what it is. Doesn't affect me either way. Don't give a shit. Not trying to get attention. If men say stupid shit, I just ignore it because they're very low frequency men. Those are not people I want to interact with in any way in my life. And if I get dirty looks from women, I don't care about that either. Because right away I'm like, oh, she's uncomfortable with her sexuality. She's like covered from head to toe. And this is threatening to her because I'm out and about here in the world with me and my boobs. I can't even tell you how many times my boobs have triggered women. It's kind of a joke in my community. And I think that's great because triggers show you where you're insecure. Triggers show you where you're repressed. I've always been comfortable with my sexuality. I've always been comfortable with talking about sex, with talking about orgasms, with being my own sexual energy. Feminine energy has very sexual elements to it. And what most people don't understand because of misogyny is that sexual energy doesn't have to mean sex. Sexual energy is creativity. When you are in full agency of your sexual energy and power as a woman, you are creating massive things in your life. You are creating incredible business, life decisions, beauty, mothering. It's all connected because sexual energy is the creative force of the universe. And owning that sexuality is so powerful that when you're around women and or men who don't get it, it's very threatening. It's threatening to the women, very threatening. And to the men, they interpret it as if you're doing it for them, right? And they don't like when you're not because they think it should be for them because they've been trained, they've been programmed. They're not divine masculine. They're lower frequency men. They are in the distorted patriarchal paradigm, the Luciferian duality. And having full agency over your sexuality eventually becomes having full agency over how you dress, how you look, what you want to look like in the world. You get to look like whatever the fuck you want to look like. And you have freedom, just like Cleopatra and her black eyeliner and her fancy jewelry and her unbelievably luxurious clothing and hairstyles, inordinate amount of energy going towards that. You can be her, or you can be a homesteader who genuinely loves to just have your hands in the dirt and you don't want nails because dirt under nails is not a good thing, right? And you don't want to have a ton of different clothes. You want a basic minimalist wardrobe and you love your gray hair, like I said, and you embrace wrinkles because you think they're gorgeous and you love that when you look in the mirror. That's your prerogative. And you can be very sexy that way too. You can own owning your sexuality. I just want to make sure this is crystal clear because I can see this being an area for misinterpretation. You can be very sexy, very in ownership and agency of your sexuality and look like a nun, right? So the way you dress, if you're choosing it, if you're sovereign, the way you dress has nothing to do with ownership of your sexuality. That's programming. That's misogyny. There are a lot of women who dress, quote, sexy, who have zero agency over their sexuality. They think this is what sexy is to men, so I need to dress like this, and I'm going to get attention, or I'm going to get a man, or, fill in the blanks. I'm going to get some validation for this. Some of those women are the most repressed women sexually. They don't have cervical orgasms. They are actually not comfortable with their sexuality. They're comfortable looking sexy. That's different. So I wanted to make sure to clear that up. They're not the same thing. But we have a very long and storied history of women being controlled, the divine feminine being controlled by manner of rules, laws, and regulations about what we wear. And that's why I'm so adamant about this topic and teaching the nuances and how you can be in a trap of this through religion, through society, through family, through culture, without realizing it. And I don't know if many of you know this, but for over 200 years, there was a prohibition against women wearing pants. Women were not allowed to wear pants for 200 years. Just let that sink in. And the roots of the law that banned women from wearing pants obviously go way back, because I was going way back from before Jesus was here earlier in this podcast episode. But there have throughout history been these dictates placed on women that they should adhere to specific roles and specific appearances. And in many societies, women were expected to wear dresses or skirts, which symbolized femininity and modesty. And these rules and laws and norms were reinforced and ingrained by cultural influences, society influences, religious influences. And for example, in the early 19th century, many Western countries, including France, introduced laws that prohibited women from wearing pants. And they aimed to enforce dress codes in society, maintaining very strong distinctions between what women could and could not wear. And violating these regulations led to arrest, social ostracization for women who dared to challenge these norms. And, this anti-pants law was rooted in much bigger themes, which was, of course, the belief that women's bodies should be covered and concealed. Why? To preserve their virtue and protect societal morals. Again, it was a woman who was responsible for the ill-fated morals of society. They had to wear had to wear skirts, not pants, in order to be virtuous. And that women's appearance should prioritize the idea of femininity and conform to that based on whoever was deciding at the time what it meant to be feminine. And of course it was men. Sure, that's a spoiler alert. Sure, you could have figured that out already. But this ban on women wearing pants had a huge implication for women's rights and for the evolution of fashion. But it just restricted women's freedom. Once again, it restricted the divine feminine. It restricted the ability of a woman to choose what they wanted to wear and express their own style, and perpetuated the notion that women should conform to specific roles and stifle their own self-expression and autonomy. And it was really an act of bravery to wear pants, because you were challenging societal norms. And the fight for clothing freedom really was mirroring the bigger battles for suffrage at the time, and education and employment rights. And, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, when I was an attorney, it was kind of the opposite. All of the female attorneys were, and bankers on Wall Street were pants only. And it was sort of, a lot of that was full swing the other direction. Like, they wanted to be more socially accepted by men. In other words, if you were too feminine, that was a bad thing. If you dressed in dresses and had long hair and long nails and heels like I did, that was not met with a lot of approval. Obviously, I didn't give a shit. And eventually people got over it because I wasn't going to change it. And I commanded the respect that I got from clients and from partners and from associates because of my work product, my quality of my work. And I wasn't going to change what I looked like because of someone's insecurity about it, or someone's vision of, okay, you're on Wall Street now, you should look a certain way. So pretty ironic that back in the day women weren't allowed to wear pants, and now high-powered women in high-powered positions making tons of money were adopting the more masculine dress code of, we're going to wear pants because we're going to have to appear more like men. And I did find that a lot of women who had to fight their way to the top, basically, especially women that were much older than me. These are women that were in their 50s when I was in my 20s. They were coming in at a time where women weren't really getting to the top on Wall Street or becoming name partners or partners at big law firms. And so the women that did, for sure, had to make a lot of adjustments that weren't autonomy. They were doing it so they could fit in and be accepted. And a lot of the women I spoke to who were older, they were like, yeah, back in the day, we wouldn't have been allowed to dress how you are. And some of them still held on to that. Some of them saw that that was oppression. But getting back to what really is going on here, which is the oppression of the divine feminine. We know that for most of history, women have lived as second-class citizens. American women were only given the right to vote in the 20th century. And as recently as the 1970s, a woman could be denied a credit card unless it had her husband's signature. The same thing with a bank account. And this whole idea of wearing clothes that don't fit societal norms is all part of this oppression. And as recently as the 1940s, women could be arrested for wearing pants in public. And waist-cinching corsets that women had to wear were, they could barely breathe in these things. And that was to cinch the waistline. That dates back to the 16th century. They were notoriously uncomfortable. They were made from things like whalebone, and the binding of feet in China, and all of the things that have been done and imposed on women or expected of women or restricted from women. And obviously it went beyond clothes. There were at one point eye drops made from the belladonna plant, which is lethal, made the eyes look bigger because larger eyes have been considered a symbol of beauty. So they were given, 16th century women were given a very dangerous concoction of belladonna. And it was reported also in 19th century France. And it was used to dilate pupils. And how uncomfortable, how miserable, how awful. That was an extreme measure that women were trying to live up to, looking this certain way. And, with the binding of the feet for Chinese women, like I just mentioned, those women had their feet broken to make them smaller. I mean, that is a horrifying example of oppression of the divine feminine. And it was to achieve what they called golden lotus feet. And little girls as young as 5 would have their 4 smaller toes bent under their foot, tightly bound, impeding the growth of the foot, permanently deforming it. And the feet were kept bound for the rest of her life, losing toes to infection. And even women who had all their toes still had a really difficult time walking. And this was actually more common in the upper classes, wealthier women. But lower classes would sometimes adopt the process in order to make their women, their daughters, more marriageable, better marriage prospects. And crazily, foot binding continued well into the 20th century. And just so many different things that women have had to deal with. What is accepted, what's not accepted. They have to cover up. They have to bind their feet. They have to wear corsets. They have to dilate their pupils. There was a period of time in the 1820s where women had very limited use of their arms because they were wearing those big, giant, puffy sleeves known as Lego mutton sleeves, puffy sleeves that were so outrageously large that the women could barely move. The sleeves were like ballooned at the shoulder, tapered down along the arm, and then they were like super tight at the wrist. These sleeves prevented women from raising their arms above their heads. This trend continued throughout the Victorian era, and layers of undergarments. And some of these women in this era were so weighed down by fabric that they were constantly fainting, constantly hot, barely able to move, barely able to breathe. It was a physical manifestation of oppression. And, through a lot of history, pale skin was an obsession. So women were going to extremes to achieve a pasty look. Lead-based makeup goes all the way back to ancient Greece to give women the appearance of lighter skin. And Queen Elizabeth was notorious for this. She used this very toxic product in order to cover up facial scars that resulted from smallpox. And of course, they were being poisoned, led to hair loss, welts, inflammation, death. And another thing women did to lighten their skin, swallowing arsenic, literally. And this was very tragic. In India alone, it's determined that hundreds of millions of dollars are spent today on skin whitening. And obviously, a lot of this has very dangerous side effects. But at the turn of the 20th century, arsenic wafers were an actual beauty product. And this is well documented. And I could go on and on and on about what is the perfect body type, what makes somebody beautiful. It changes. And women have been trying to fit into the mold of whatever it is. And different societies had different aesthetics. Ancient Greeks were defining beauty as the beautiful evil thing. That's their exact literary term. And the beautiful woman was evil because she was beautiful, and beautiful because she was evil. And the ancient statues show us the artist's idealized form, which to the ancient Greeks was large hips, full breasts, not flat stomach, more round, if you will, roundish, but they were defining beauty. And the early Renaissance era moved away from strict religious values of the Middle Ages. So they started painting fuller breasts and naked breasts without the clothes, symbolizing fertility and sensuality. And then you have the idealized women of artists like Raphael that were curvy, very pale, round faces. And the Elizabethan era had this era of makeup and full face of makeup. And then after the French Revolution into the late 18th century, the French were rebelling against the aristocracy, right? During the French Revolution in 1789. So people wanted to distance themselves from the excesses of royalty, right? So makeup became way more simple. And the crazy ornate gowns of the very wealthy were kind of stripped down and pared down and became more of a simple aesthetic. So these things are all ways of controlling women. Skirt hemlines, were they high, were they low? The flappers brought about a complete change in fashion and body type in America in the 1920s, right? Women were getting a little bit of a taste of independence. And the ideal woman's body at that point in time in the 20s, the flappers, was a more boyish figure. And for the first time, the curvy, more, quote, fertile look was completely out. So girls wanted to look like they had no curves and were chopping their hair super short. And skirt hemlines were super high, so women could move and have some fun. And, that's really where the beginning of the modern obsession with weight began. So before the 20s, it was really hard for people to weigh themselves unless they were super rich. Full-length mirrors were very expensive. So there were a lot of factors that went into play there. But as soon as bathroom scales were invented, it was very easy to notice your own weight, right? So the increase of department stores gave lower class women a chance to see all of themselves in a full-length mirror by going into a department store. Also could see all of their flaws. And that sort of started this whole obsession with appearance. And the 20s obviously ended badly. The Depression, we get to the 30s and 40s, and most women weren't able to worry about what they look like. So then the ideal body type went back to being slightly more full. It is an ongoing saga. It's an ongoing saga. And it is rooted and based in misogyny. It is carried by mothers to their daughters. It is carried by fathers to their sons and their daughters. And it's time to free yourself from that. It's time to free yourself from that. And this whole movement that I find very disturbing and disgusting, those are the only ways I can describe it. This whole movement of, quote, going natural is just a passive aggressive way at projecting hatred, more hatred onto women. And if you're a woman who has decided that all of the things you may have been doing, makeup, hair, eyelashes, nails, whatever it may be, if you have decided that those things are a waste of time and a waste of money, and you don't enjoy that, you don't enjoy looking at that in the mirror, and it doesn't give you any sense of joy to express yourself in that way, and you want to not do those things, that's beautiful. When you're making a sovereign decision. Likewise, if you've never done those things and you suddenly decide you want to dye your hair, you want to get eyelashes, you want to get your nails and toes done, and you want to dress in form-fitting clothing because you didn't do that before because you were under the belief that that wasn't virtuous, that wasn't wholesome, that was somehow against God, and you realize now that that's bullshit, so you want to do those things now, that's awesome. Anything you choose for yourself, when you are sovereign, when you are self-loving, is awesome because you get to choose that. And in keeping with the overall frequency of this podcast of She Can Have It All, having it all is about being the most full expression of who you are and fully embracing your divine feminine. And that will not look the same for any two women because it's very unique and it's incredibly divine to be the fullest expression of the divine feminine. And I can promise you and tell you that when you do that, you will be triggering a lot of people because to embody the fullness of your divine feminine, you are going in the face of religions, all religions, every single religion is a misogynistic cult. You will be going in the face of that. You will be going in the face of societal norms. You will be going in the face of authoritarian paradigms. You will be going in the face of patriarchal paradigms. You will be going in the face of misogyny, which is part and parcel of the Luciferian agenda. Because anything to oppress the divine feminine is a win for the satanic agenda. So when you decide that you are going to break free from that, and you do, and you heal, and you embody the fullness of your divine feminine, you reverberate at such a powerful frequency, you can't help but trigger people. It's not that you're doing it intentionally, and I know a lot of you already experienced that, because many of you have told me this, that when you have stepped into this place, all of a sudden people who were okay with you before suddenly are not. Why? Because you're powerful, you're strong, you're embodied, you're orgasmic, you are a creator. You're vibrant, you're alive, you are juicy, you're exciting, you're happy, you're joyful. You love yourself. That sends shockwaves right to the heart of every person who is still stuck in self-loathing, self-hatred, and insecurity. So my message to all of you is to get to that place. Embrace your full feminine energy and completely disregard any judgment that anyone has connecting your choices of physical appearance and connection to any kind of virtues, because that's not real. That's their own projection, their own insecurity. So thank you everyone for being here. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. This topic is just so incredibly important, and I hope you found something valuable in listening. Sending you guys lots of love, and I look forward to the next episode. You can find me on Instagram at Liana Shanti, and you can find all of my programs for healing and spiritual programs at lianashanti.com. And for everything health related, healing candida, programs in women's hormones, men's health, children's health, brain health, dental health, and for my health coach certification school, you can find that on Instagram at HMI Nutrition School or on the web at hminutrition.com. For business programs, you can find those at 12dbschool.com.